Everybody, peace. Welcome to the Started By the NFL show. Wherever or however you are listening, we're so grateful to have you here with us. As you guys know, I'm your host, Casuan Cottle, and we have got a wonderful show for you today, guys. We are going to be recapping the Monday Night Football game between the 49ers and the Vikings, and we are also, I'm going to be previewing the first edition of the MVP leaderboards for the season. So I'm just gonna be previewing, analyzing who I think are the four front runners for the MVP race at this point in the NFL season, and I know we're gonna do that in the second segment. I just want to say that as a whole, as media pundits and media personalities, we have to stray away, or at least try to, from the notion that every MVP candidate has to be a quarterback. I think that's something that really hinders the nuance and the diversity of the NFL. But it's understandable why that's the thought process, because the quarterback position is arguably the most important position in football, in let alone football, in sports in general. So I understand why, if you're the most proficient player at the most important position in sports, you're more than likely going to be a front runner for the MVP in the MVP race. But there's so much talent in other positions that those players get overlooked because of the quarterback position. However, this year in particular is shedding a lot of light on how impactful other skill positions can be outside of the quarterback position. And so I'm just leaving right there, but we're gonna get into that in the next segment. But to start out the show, like I said, guys, we're going to start with a Monday Night Football recap between the Vikings and the 49ers. But before we get into it, guys, be sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button as well, so you guys stay up to date on all of our latest content that we post daily. Be sure to follow us on Patreon as well. You can do so by going to patreon.com, click on the search bar, and typing in Sorry to Bother You Show. That way you can get access to all of our exclusive content that we post daily. And if you'd like to support our network and our company, you can do so by following the link in the ticker below. It's streamelements.com/sorry to bother you show/tip. Once again, it's streamelements.com/sorry to bother you show/tip. If you haven't already, be sure to check out the other shows on the Sorry to Bother You Show as well. Our basketball show, our college football show, as well as our podcasts that we record once every 2 weeks. We have a number of wonderful guests that come on our show and share their thoughts and insights. So it's a pleasure to have them on, and it's a pleasure to be able to create that content for you guys. So if you haven't already, be sure to check those out as well. But like I said, so Monday Night Football recap, Vikings 49ers. So for those of you who weren't able to watch the Monday night game last night, the Minnesota Vikings took on the San Francisco 49ers in Minnesota. Minnesota won the game by a score of 22-17. And it was obviously a hard-fought victory for Minnesota, but Jordan Addison was a huge focal point for Minnesota in this game, with Justin Jefferson being out. He had 7 receptions, 123 yards, two touchdowns. Kirk Cousins threw for 378 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception. In comparison to Brock Purdy, who threw for 272 yards, 1 touchdown, and 2 interceptions. And the question automatically becomes, okay, is this good Minnesota or bad San Francisco? And because I watched the game live, something that stood out to me was the decision making of Brock Purdy, as well as Minnesota's ability to stay disciplined on the motions and the crossing routes and the diversity the different formations that San Francisco throws out. And so what that tells me is that one, Brock Purdy is starting to defense are starting to make adjustments on Brock Purdy. So one reason that NFL rookies are so proficient and can have are inclined to sometimes have big seasons in their rookie year is because there's no tape on the guys. Think about great quarterbacks that had great rookie seasons. Andrew Luck, Russell Wilson, Robert Griffin III. These guys have tremendous rookie seasons, and it's because there's no tape, there's no film on these guys, right? So but what happens is defenses have no film, so they don't know what to scout, and they don't know how to necessarily game plan for the quarterback. And obviously that's to the offensive team's advantage, to the quarterback's advantage. And so quarterbacks are able to go to their primary, secondary, and tertiary options and not have to make adjustments on the fly. But what happens is, as you're able to watch film on quarterbacks, you're able to take away their primary, their secondary, and their tertiary, and you're forcing quarterbacks now to make decisions and make reads on the fly because you've taken away all their options. And that's where great quarterbacks thrive, or that's what determines the success of a great quarterback. Guys like Peyton Manning and Tom Brady and Patrick Mahomes and Aaron Rodgers, they're able to make adjustments and make reads on the fly with the defense taking away their options, their primary options. And so what's starting to happen now is that teams have now gotten enough film on Brock Purdy to say, okay, this is what he likes to do, this is what he doesn't like to do. We're going to force him to do this. We're going to force him to stay in this pocket. We're going to get pressure from outside the pocket and then collapse it inside. We're going to force him to step up into the pocket. We're going to take away his checkdowns, and we're going to force him to throw the ball in tight windows against the cover three. And so, that's the scouting report on Brock Purdy. And teams are starting to do that now. And so now we're starting to see how is Brock Purdy going to adjust to defenses now knowing exactly how he plays, what he likes to do, and his tendencies, and taking those away. Now we're going to really start to see how good Brock Purdy is. This is going to be a true indicator of how good he is. Now the defenses have gotten enough film on him. He's been a starter for about 6 or 7 games now, 8 games. Sorry, I don't know the exact number. If I'm wrong with that, one of you guys correct me. But there's enough film on Brock Purdy now to say, okay, this is what he likes to do. This is what he doesn't like to do. Let's take it away. And how he responds to this is going to be indicative of not only his success, but the 49ers' success for the rest of the season. Because we saw in the last drive of the game, Brock Purdy, like I said, they forced him to step up into the pocket, forced him to throw a tight window deep in cover 3. They took away his checkdowns, and it was a bad throw. It was in a tight window, and Minnesota was able to create that turnover and seal the victory. But teams are now starting to take that away from Brock Purdy, and now they're starting to see what he likes to do. How will he respond? How will Kyle Shanahan be able to draw up plays that are conducive and beneficial for Brock Purdy in this offense? Then we saw that Christian McCaffrey had 15 carries, 45 yards, 1 touchdown. McCaffrey also had 51 receiving yards and a touchdown to go along with that as well. In court, George Kittle had 78 yards, and Brandon Ayuk had 57 yards, and Juwan Jennings had 54 yards. But what's starting to happen is you don't see as many of those deep throws anymore. You don't see as many of the what looks like easy plays being made for Brock Purdy, because defense, like I said, are taking away those checkdowns. They're staying disciplined on all the motions and the crossing routes, so you don't see those plays too often getting open for San Francisco. Not to mention that that Deebo Samuel obviously is still out, still hurt, which is huge, which is a blow to San Francisco's offense. And I believe that if Deebo was healthy and playing, it would mask a lot of the deficiencies that defenses are now beginning to expose in Brock Purdy. So with Debo Samuels being out, we're getting a quicker adjustment, a quicker approximation of what Brock Purdy truly is. And I'm not gonna sit here and say that he's a bust. No, I'm not gonna sit here and say that he's great. He's gonna rise above all of this and he's gonna show that he's a top 5 quarterback. I'm not gonna say that, because realistically, what I think about Brock Purdy is what I thought all along, that he's an average quarterback. Do I think he's better than Jimmy Garoppolo? Marginally, because of his ability to scramble, yeah, and extend plays. Do I think he's better than Kirk Cousins? Not even close. So I'm sure he falls somewhere along that 15 to 20 range. So he's an average quarterback. So then the question becomes: is average good enough for San Francisco to win a Super Bowl? And the answer to that is no. So then the question becomes: what is the next move now for San Francisco? Because you're giving away Trey Lance. Obviously, you're giving away Jimmy G. And now you have Brock Purdy. You're stuck. You've put all your cards in the middle of the table for Brock. So you have to figure this out for San Francisco. And let me know what you guys think in the chat room about that. Are we starting to get a more accurate assumption of what Brock Purdy is, or is this just 2 games that San Francisco have lost in a row and nothing really to bat your eyes about? And if we look at Minnesota finally put together a good game defensively for 4+ quarters, and we see what Minnesota's capable of doing when their defense is playing well. Though the rushing attack for Minnesota still leaves a lot to be desired. Alexander Madison had 8 carries for 39 yards, and Cam Akers had 10 carries for 31 yards. It's still not enough to balance the offense out, but I'll be honest, when you have so many offensive weapons that Minnesota has on the outside with Addison and Hawkinson and Powell and Akers coming out of the backfield, and then Justin Jefferson when he gets healthy, you can say to yourself, there's no need to have much of a rushing attack, but there's got to be some sort of balance, especially when you get to the playoffs. So will Minnesota be able to make those adjustments? Remain to be seen. But those are things that I saw from this Monday Night Football game. I have more questions now about San Francisco than I do about Minnesota. But let me know what you guys think in the chat room. Was this more good Minnesota or more so bad San Francisco? And what does this game represent for both these teams moving forward? Leave your thoughts in the chat room, guys. In our next segment, though, guys, we, like I said, are going to be discussing the MVP leaderboard and who my candidates are. The top 4 candidates for the MVP race so far. So, guys, be sure to stick around for that. You're not going to miss it. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back. In case you missed the first segment of our show, we discussed the recap from the Monday Night Football game between the Minnesota Vikings and the San Francisco 49ers. And I just talked about how both of this game, what could possibly represent what we should expect to see in the future from both of these teams moving forward. Is there cause for concern for Brock Purdy in San Francisco? Specifically, his ability to make adjustments to teams taking away his primary options. And is Minnesota now starting to make a move in the right direction with their defense finally putting together a complete game for 4 quarters? And, these are questions that remain to be seen, but I believe that this game leaves more questions for San Francisco than it does for the Minnesota Vikings. And in this segment, guys, we're going to be discussing our MVP frontrunners for the season so far in the NFL. If you heard my opening monologue to start the show, I talked about how oftentimes skill position players are marginalized because of the importance of the quarterback position. But understandably so, the quarterback position is so important, the most important position in sports, you could argue, that it's understandable that if you're the best at the most important position, then you're automatically going to put yourself in contention to be in the MVP candidate race. But this season, more than ever in the NFL, is starting to show people that skill position players outside of the quarterback positions can have an enormous impact on the team's success. And this leaderboard is going to show us why. So, so like we normally did last year, we'll start at 4 and we'll move up to number 1. So, at number 4, I've got Tua Tagovailoa of the Miami Dolphins, and I would have Tua higher if he didn't perform the way in which he did against the Philadelphia Eagles on Sunday Night Football. Listen, Tua has 2,000 yards already on the season, completion percentage of 71%, 15 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, passer rating of 110. The question for me becomes now, though, there's a slight cause for concern because I have seen Miami perform now against 2 legitimate teams in Buffalo and in Philadelphia, and they looked average in both of those performances, and that's a little cause for concern for me looking at Miami, because now the question becomes, is what we saw in the first couple weeks of the season a facade, or were they just beating up on bad teams? Now, I don't want to get mistaken. In order, if you have to have some sort of level of talent, and you have to be good to some extent as a team in order to score 70 points in an NFL game. I'm not questioning that. My question is now, will they be able to rise to the occasion? Will they be good enough to knock off a Kansas City or a Baltimore in the playoffs? That now becomes my question. And because they have been performing to the way in which they have, we now have to hold them to that standard. That's the standard now Miami has to be held to. And so I'm looking at Miami and I'm looking at Tua. How will they perform against these good teams? And from what I've seen so far, that creates a little cause for concern. Now, personally, I believe that Miami is legitimate. I do think they're a great team. They just ran into a Buffalo team that's starting to get rhythm on the defensive end. And personally, Miami had a lot of opportunities to defeat Philadelphia this past weekend, but they just missed their opportunities. So I do think Miami's legitimate, but based on how they performed and how Tua performed on Sunday night against Philadelphia, I have him at number 4. And at number 3, I have Myles Garrett. Listen, Myles Garrett already has 7.5 sacks on the season. By far the defensive player of the year. If not for his performance, the way he's been playing, you wouldn't hear anything about Cleveland because Deshaun Watson hasn't been playing to the level in which people expected him to play after getting that ginormous contract. But Myles Garrett is the catalyst for this Cleveland Browns team as a whole, not just defensively. They go as he goes. We saw his tangible impact when they played Baltimore, as well as when they played Indianapolis this past weekend. And we saw how he performed when he played the 49ers as well. So he's I would need to see honestly just more victories out of Cleveland in order for me to move Myles Garrett further up on this MVP list. But there's no question that Myles Garrett is an MVP frontrunner, and it would unfortunately, because of the way that the MVP race is set up, there's got to be a narrative, there's got to be a storyline always behind it, right? And the storyline for Myles Garrett could be that Deshaun Watson doesn't perform the way he does, in the way he's supposed to, which now leads him to having to step up and the defense having to step up. That's a storyline, but we understand that sports is all about narrative, so there's always a narrative, there's always some sort of storyline that goes on that helps create that narrative that's easy to sell in the MVP race. But I have Myles Garrett at number 3. And at number 2, I have Lamar Jackson. And listen, there is understandably still a little cause for concern with Lamar Jackson in terms of his consistency. I don't think at this point anyone's questioning his ability to play the quarterback position or questioning his ability to be a great quarterback. They just need him to do it consistently. And this is what happens when you have success, like I said, as a rookie in your first year starting at an early age, early on in your career, because now that is the standard to which you're held to for the entirety of your career. Listen, Lamar Jackson won the MVP in his first year as a starter, akin to a Patrick Mahomes. And so that has been the standard now that Lamar Jackson has been held to his entire career, which isn't a bad thing. I think it's good to have that pressure. It's good to be held to that standard, because now people expect more out of you. If people didn't think Lamar Jackson was a good quarterback, they wouldn't care. They could care less about what he does. But because people have such high expectations for him, to whom much is given, much is required. And that, obviously that not only translates to sports but to life as well. So we need to learn to embrace that pressure of having a standard, of having accountability. So Lamar is by far, he's a great quarterback. So now it becomes, can you be consistent with it? And this was the first complete game that the Ravens offense played. And now guys are starting to get healthy as well for Baltimore. We saw what Baltimore was able to do even when they had the injuries, when OBJ was out, when Nelson Aguilar was out, when Zay Flowers was out, and forgive me, I'm the starting running back's name for Baltimore is Gus Edwards, and when Gus Edwards was out. But now that they got everybody back to go along with Mark Andrews, Lamar Jackson now has his collection of pieces and talent around him to be proficient. And it's great to see, and now the question becomes, can he do this consistently? And I know people are going to say, yes, well, Detroit's defense hasn't been good all year. Detroit's offense didn't help. because they only had they didn't get into the red zone until the fourth quarter of the game, which meant the defense kept having to get back onto the field for Detroit, which means they were tired. They were tired out. So I understand all of that. And Lamar Jackson is showing people that he's worth something I've been saying for the past 2 years, that he's worth the extension, because what's your other option? You've got the talents to win now. What are you going to do? Not sign him and let him walk, and now you're in rebuilding mode? Even though you have the pieces there? You might as well go all in with him. And we have to remember that Lamar has been hurt the past 2 years. He missed 5 games last year, and he missed 5 games the year before that. We become such prisoners of the moment that we forget the success, and how quickly we forget the success that people have had. There's an old Shakespeare quote from Julius Caesar that says, "The evil that men do lives after. The good is often tattered with their bones." And basically what that means, we quickly forget the good that people have done, but the bad things, the bad plays, the bad decision making that people have committed long lives after them. And in the same way with sports, same thing with football. We quickly forget the good things that these players have done, but we're quick to hound on the negative things, or the bad decision making, or the poor play that they've done. So, with Lamar Jackson, we have to remember the great things he's done in this league. Now, I will say, let's get 4 or 5 of these games in a row, and then we can start, seriously considering Lamar as MVP candidate. Now I got him at number 2 now, but the margin between 1 and 2 is far greater than the margin between 2 and 3, and that's because of the guy you just saw on the screen, Patrick Mahomes, who I have at number 1. Listen, Patrick Mahomes, what is there to say? 15 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, 2,000 yards, pass rating of 101. You could argue that Kansas City has the best defense in the NFL. You could argue that. But listen, I don't think it's particularly close. Patrick Mahomes is starting to pull away from everyone with this MVP race. But like I said, if Lamar Jackson can continue to string together 4 or 5 of the games in the way in which he played this past weekend, I think that will make the MVP race much closer. And also, if Myles Garrett and Cleveland can continue to perform and string together a couple more wins, that'll make the margin closer. But right now, it's not even close. I have Patrick Mahomes as my MVP front runner. And what Patrick Mahomes runs the risk of happening to him, same thing happened to LeBron James and Michael Jordan. More so Michael Jordan than LeBron James, but these guys have become so talented and dominant in their sport that you get voter fatigue. Same thing with Alabama in college football. You get voter fatigue, and you don't want to keep rewarding these guys because you take for granted the things that they're doing and the level of play to which they're playing at, and so you want to start finding reasons to give it to other guys. But you have to appreciate talent and greatness when you see it. And just like Michael Jordan missed out on a lot of MVPs because of the voting, LeBron James missed out on a couple of MVPs because of the voting, Patrick Mahomes is going to run the risk of missing out on a couple of MVP awards because of voter fatigue. And it's unfortunate, but I think that's what happens when you reach a certain level of greatness. But we can't fall into that trap. We have to be unbiased, we have to be objective, and we have to analyze what we're looking at with intent and with purpose. And when you look at the film, when you look at the level of play, the guys, in the way in which guys have been playing, there's no question that Patrick Mahomes is the MVP front runner, especially what he's been able to do with the pieces around him. No one would question that he doesn't have as much talent around him as he had in previous years. The addition of Mecole Hardman helps him out tremendously, but there's not as much talent on that Kansas City offense as there was in years prior. And for Patrick Mahomes to still be able to perform the way in which he's performing is phenomenal. It's a testament, like I said, to his greatness. But those are my MVP front runners so far, guys. Those are my top 4. Let me know what you guys think about that in the chat room. Am I off? Am I accurate? Who are your MVP front runners? Leave your thoughts in the chat room, guys. But with that being said, that's it for our show for today, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. It's been a wonderful show. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you haven't already, be sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button as well, so you guys can stay up to date on all of our latest content. And be sure to follow us on Patreon as well. You can do so by going to patreon.com, clicking on the search bar, and typing in "Sorry to Bother You Show." That way you can get access to all of our exclusive content that we post daily. And if you'd like to support our network and our company, you can do so by following the link in the ticker below. It's streamelements.com/sorry-to-bother-you-show/tip. Once again, it's streamelements.com/sorry-to-bother-you-show/tip. Listen, none of this is possible without you guys as fans, so we're so grateful and honored for all the love and support that you show us, and it's an honor and privilege to be here. So, with that being said, guys, we'll be back again, same time tomorrow, 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, with our basketball show tomorrow. So, that's something you're not going to miss, guys. But until next time, guys, can you stay safe, be vigilant, make smart decisions, and